Welcome to the captivating realm of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our exciting new stories. Enjoy the journey.
Queen Maya's furious scream reverberates through the Ashen royal palace as she learns of Joseph Brown's arrival. The human ambassador, unaware of the storm he's walking into, stands nervously before the ornate throne room doors. Execute him immediately. Maya's voice bellows from inside. The Ashen guards surrounding Joseph exchange puzzled glances before roughly grabbing his arms. What's happening? Joseph demands, struggling against their grip. The doors swing open with force, revealing Queen Maya, her iridescent scales gleaming ominously in the light. How dare you show your face here again, human, she hisses, her tail whipping violently behind her. After what you've done. Joseph's mind races, desperately trying to recall any diplomatic misstep from his past mission. Your Majesty, I don't understand. Silence. Maya interrupts. Your seed has taken root. I carry your half-breed child. The words hit Joseph like a physical blow. His eyes widen as he notices, for the first time, the faint curve of her abdomen. But how? Only once, Maya spits, her voice dripping with venom. It should have been impossible. Do you realize what this means for me? For my rule. Just then, a noble steps forward, his voice ringing out with authority. According to our ancient laws, any monarch who bears a half-breed child must abdicate the throne. The throne room erupts in chaos. Joseph struggles to understand the implications. Ashen females usually take years to conceive, and his success on the first attempt is unheard of. Outside the palace, news of the crisis spreads like wildfire. The human embassy on the Ashen homeworld urgently informs Earth's government about Joseph's arrest and the shock of the Queen's pregnancy. The Interstellar Relations Committee convenes in an emergency session. This could spark a war, one member warns, as tensions rise. Meanwhile, a group of Adian nobles secretly gathers, seizing the opportunity in the chaos. The human and his child could be the key to overthrowing Maya's regime, one whispers excitedly. Meanwhile, Earth's military puts its fleet on high alert. Warships powering up in preparation for a potential conflict with the Adians. Back in the palace, Joseph is thrown into a holding cell. He paces the small, confining space, his mind in turmoil. How could a single night of passion have led to this? He knows he needs to find a way out, protect himself and his unborn child, and somehow avert an interstellar war. In the Royal Medical Wing, Maya undergoes tests that confirm the extraordinary nature of her pregnancy. Ashen doctors marvel at the rapid progression of her condition, and soon the news leaks to the public. The streets of Ashen fill with protesters, some seeing the pregnancy as a sign of human superiority, while others view it as a threat to Adian purity. The planet stands on the verge of civil unrest as the crisis unfolds. Both humanity and the Adians face a potential conflict that could alter the course of the galaxy. At the heart of it all lies an unexpected pregnancy that defies all odds and threatens to change everything. As night falls, Joseph lies awake in his cell, weighed down by the events of the day. The cold metal floor offers no comfort as he replays the throne room scene over and over in his mind, each time reliving the shock of Maya's words. The first rays of dawn creep through the small window of his cell, casting long shadows across the floor. Joseph sits up, running a hand through his disheveled hair when he hears footsteps approaching. The cell door hisses open, revealing a female Ashen with opal-like scales glowing softly in the dim light. Ambassador Brown, she says, her voice tinged with curiosity. I am Dr. Zara, Chief Royal Physician. I need to conduct some tests. Joseph eyes her warily. Tests? What kind of tests? Dr. Zara's tail flicks gently as she sets down a small case. We need to understand how this pregnancy occurred. The fertility between humans and Adians is unprecedented. Joseph hesitates. This might be his chance to gather information, to understand what's happening. Slowly, he nods. All right, I'll cooperate. As Dr. Zara begins her examination, taking blood samples and scanning Joseph with various devices. Activity buzzes throughout the palace. In a dimly lit chamber, a group of Ashan nobles huddles around a holographic display. At the center stands Lord Zan, his deep midnight blue scales absorbing the surrounding light. The human ambassador could be the key to our plans, Zan says in a low voice. If we can reach him, make him our ally, we could use this crisis to our advantage. A female noble with emerald scales leans forward. But how do we get to him? He's under heavy guard, Zan smiles. I have a plan for that. But we need to move quickly. Time is not on our side. Meanwhile, in the royal chambers, Queen Maya paces nervously, her swollen abdomen a constant reminder of the unfolding crisis. General Kral, a tall, battle-scarred Ashan, stands before her. Your Majesty, Kral says gruffly, we must act decisively. The human should be executed immediately. It's the only way to calm the unrest. Maya stops pacing, fixing Kral with a piercing gaze. And spark a war with Earth in the process? No, there must be another way. As they debate, an Earth vessel enters Adian space. On its bridge, Admiral Helena Reeves stands with her hands clasped behind her back, her face set with determination. The Adian Defense Fleet is hailing us, Admiral, her communications officer reports. Reeves nods. Open a channel. Let's hope diplomacy prevails. Back in Joseph's cell, Dr. Zara's eyes widen as she examines the test results. This is remarkable, she murmurs. Joseph sits up straighter. What is it? What did you find? Dr. Zara looks at him with a mix of awe and concern. The embryo. It's developing at an accelerated rate. And its genetic makeup shows traits from both species. Joseph's mind spins with the implications. What does that mean for the child? For Maya, before Dr. Zara can answer, the sound of shouting erupts outside the cell. The door bursts open, and a regal-looking male Ashan with midnight blue scales enters, accompanied by others. Ambassador Brown, the leader says urgently. I am Lord Zan. We're here to help you, but we must move quickly. Joseph looks from Lord Zan to Dr. Zara. Confusion and alarm on his face. What's going on? Dr. Zara hesitates, then presses a small device into Joseph's hand. Use this to contact the human embassy. Tell them what you've learned. Alarms blare throughout the palace, and Joseph is swept into a whirlwind of action. Lord Zan and his supporters rush him through hidden passages, pursued by guards. Joseph's mind races. He needs to prevent a war, protect his child, and navigate the complex political landscape he's been thrust into. As they emerge into the cool night air of the Ashan capital, Joseph realizes that the next few hours will decide not only his fate but the future of human-Ashan relations. The city stretches before them. A sea of lights and towering structures. In the distance, the sounds of protests can be heard, a reminder of the unrest gripping the planet. Lord Zan turns to Joseph, his eyes gleaming in the starlight. Ambassador, we're taking you to a secure location. From there, you'll have the chance to address the Adian people. Are you ready to make history? Joseph's heart pounds as he follows Lord Zan through the winding streets. The cool night air is a sharp contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of his cell. As they move swiftly through the shadows, Joseph's mind struggles to make sense of the situation. We're almost there, Ambassador, Lord Zan whispers. Once we reach the broadcast location, you'll have your chance to speak to the people. Suddenly, a piercing alarm cuts through the night, followed by the distant sound of shouting. Joseph's breath catches as he realizes the palace must have discovered his escape. We need to move faster. Captain Lyra urges, her shimmering blue scales reflecting the light as she pushes them forward. The loyal guards will be searching for us. As they round a corner, Joseph almost collides with a figure emerging from a side alley. He stumbles back, ready to flee, but recognizes Dr. Zara. Ambassador Brown, she says urgently. I've been looking for you. We don't have much time. Lord Zan's eyes narrow. What are you doing here, Doctor? Dr. Zara holds up her hands. I'm here to help. The Queen's pregnancy is advancing faster than anyone anticipated. We need to act quickly to prevent a catastrophe. Joseph's mind reels at this new information. How fast, at this rate, she could give birth within weeks, Dr. Zara explains, her voice a mix of scientific curiosity and concern. The group exchanges worried glances, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Lord Zan nods decisively, "We'll need your expertise, Doctor. Come with us." They continue their journey, the sounds of unrest growing louder. As they round another corner, they encounter a scene of chaos. Protesters clash with riot police, their angry cries filling the air. "This way!" Captain Lyra hisses, guiding them down a narrow alley to avoid the conflict. Joseph's heart races as they navigate the turbulent streets, each step bringing them closer to the heart of the crisis. A shadow seemed to conceal a looming threat, and each distant shout echoed a warning of imminent capture. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him, with the fate of two species depending on his ability to reach the broadcast station and deliver the right words. Across the city, at the Royal Spaceport, Admiral Helena Reeves disembarked from her shuttle, her crisp uniform standing in stark contrast to the intricate ocean architecture around her. She was immediately greeted by a group of ocean officials, led by a stern-looking male with deep green scales. "Admiral Reeves," he said, his tone cold and formal. "I am Foreign Minister Thax. Your presence here is unexpected." Helena's expression remained calm as she responded. "Minister Thax, this situation requires immediate attention. I request an audience with Queen Maya to discuss the ongoing diplomatic crisis." Thax's scales rippled with irritation. "The Queen is unavailable. Perhaps we can arrange a meeting with all due respect, Minister," Helena interjected firmly but politely, "this issue cannot be delayed. The future of our interspecies relations is at stake." As they continued to argue, Helena discreetly activated a command on her RIS communicator, signaling the human fleet to approach Ad-Done space. It was a risky decision, but one she hoped would apply the necessary pressure to force the ocean leaders into negotiations. Meanwhile, in the palace, Queen Maya stood before a large window, her hand resting on her swollen abdomen. The rapid growth of her child had stirred a whirlwind of emotions inside her. While anger still simmered beneath the surface, it was tempered by a growing sense of protectiveness and curiosity about the life within her. "Your Majesty," General Krall's gruff voice broke her thoughts. "The human has escaped. We believe he had help from within the palace." Maya turned to face him, her iridescent scales catching the dim light. "Find him, General, but bring him to me unharmed." Krall, his surprise evident, hesitated. "But Your Majesty, eliminating the threat seems like the wisest course of action." "Are you questioning my orders, General?" Maya's voice held a dangerous edge. Krall bowed his head in submission. "No, Your Majesty. It will be done as you command." As the general left to carry out his orders, Maya returned her gaze to the window. Her hand gently moved over her abdomen, feeling the movements of her child. For the first time in the midst of the crisis, she allowed herself to imagine a future where this child, her child, could bridge the gap between their two worlds instead of being the catalyst for their destruction. Elsewhere in the city, Lord Zan received urgent news from his aide. "The human fleet is on the move," the aide reported. "They've entered ocean space." Zan's scales darkened with concern. "We're running out of time. Contact Lyra. Tell her to get the ambassador to the broadcast station immediately." At dawn, Joseph and his unlikely allies arrived at a nondescript building housing a secret broadcast facility. Every second counted as they rushed inside. "We're ready for you, Ambassador," Lord Zan said, directing them to a makeshift studio. "The fate of our worlds rests on your words." Joseph took a deep breath, mentally preparing for the monumental task ahead. As he stepped in front of the camera, he knew the next few moments would shape the future of human Ad-Done relations. The red light of the camera blinked on, and he began to speak. But before he could utter a word, the studio door burst open. General Krall stormed in, flanked by heavily armed ocean soldiers, their weapons aimed at Joseph and his allies. "Surrender now." Krall snarled, his scales rippling with anger. In the chaos that ensued, Joseph locked eyes with Lord Zan, a silent understanding passing between them. Joseph bolted for a side door while Lord Zan and Captain Lyra engaged the soldiers, creating a distraction, after him. Krull yelled, but Joseph was already speeding down a narrow corridor, his heart racing. He navigated the labyrinthine building, the sound of pursuit echoing behind him. He burst out onto an unfamiliar street, the early morning light barely illuminating the alien surroundings. With no clear direction, Joseph ran. The city stretched ahead, a maze of towering structures and winding alleys. He ducked into a side street, trying to evade his pursuers. Just as he paused to catch his breath, a hand seized his arm. Spinning around, ready to defend himself, he found himself face to face with an Ashen in a hooded cloak. "This way, human," the stranger whispered. "We can help you." With no other choice, Joseph followed. The stranger led him through a series of hidden corridors and concealed passages, eventually bringing him into a dimly lit underground chamber. "Welcome, Ambassador Brown," another Ashen greeted him. "We are the Harmony Coalition. We believe in peace between our species." As Joseph was briefed on the underground network of human sympathizers, events were unfolding rapidly across the city. At the Royal Spaceport, Admiral Helena Reeves remained firm before Foreign Minister Thax. "Minister, I must speak with Queen Maya," Helena insisted. Thax's scales rippled with agitation. "Admiral, I have already told you," he was interrupted by an aide who whispered urgently in his ear. Thax's eyes widened. What is it?" Helena demanded. "What's going on?" Thax hesitated before answering. "The Queen's pregnancy, it's progressing at an unprecedented rate. The fetus is showing signs of accelerated development." Helena's mind raced, grasping the potential significance. "Minister, this could be a scientific breakthrough of immense importance. We need to work together on this, not as adversaries." Meanwhile, Queen Maya paced her chambers, one hand resting on her swollen abdomen. The child inside her moved with surprising strength, a constant reminder of the unique life she carried. Her thoughts turned to Joseph. Despite their difficult encounter, she found herself wanting to understand him more. She made a decision. Summoning her most trusted handmaiden, she ordered, "Arrange a private meeting with Ambassador Brown. No one else must know." Unbeknownst to Maya, a hidden camera recorded her whispered instructions. Within hours, the footage leaked. Spreading across Ashen communication networks and reigniting the public debate, Lord Zan, having evaded the confrontation at the broadcast station, seized this new opportunity. He took to the streets, his voice ringing out over the growing crowd. "Fellow Ashen, the Queen herself seeks understanding with the humans. It's time for a new era of cooperation." The demonstration grew larger, attracting both Ashen citizens and the few humans present on the planet. The security forces struggled to maintain control as they were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. In a secure laboratory, Dr. Zara worked tirelessly, analyzing the latest data on the hybrid fetus. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she made a groundbreaking discovery. "This is incredible," she whispered. "The fetus's genetic structure could potentially cure a genetic disorder that has plagued the Ad-Dones for generations." As she prepared to share her findings, alarms blared throughout the city. General Krull's voice echoed from the public announcement systems. "By order of the Military High Command, Queen Maya is under protective custody. Martial law is now in effect. All human influences will be purged from our world." The announcement sent shockwaves through the city. Military vehicles rumbled through the streets as Krull's forces moved to secure key locations. In the underground hideout, Joseph received the news with horror. The Harmony Coalition members debated their next move. But Joseph's focus remained on Maya. "I need to get to the palace," he said, cutting through the discussion. Captain Lyra, who had tracked down the hideout, stepped forward. "I'll help you, Ambassador. But you should know, Dr. Zara has made a discovery about your child. It could change everything." As Lyra briefed him on the potential cure, Joseph felt both awe and fear. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him more than ever. Suddenly, the ground shook, and distant explosions echoed through the city, the human fleet. Someone gasped. They're engaging Krall's forces in orbit. Joseph knew time was running out. With Captain Lyra and a small group of coalition members, he prepared to infiltrate the palace. As they gathered their equipment and reviewed plans, Joseph's mind raced. Somewhere in the palace, Maya was alone, possibly in labor. Their child was about to be born into a world on the edge of war, and somehow, Joseph had to find a way to prevent catastrophe. As they moved into the chaos-filled streets of the Ashen capital, Joseph steeled himself for what was to come. The future of two worlds depended on the events of the next few hours. With a deep breath, Joseph stepped into the tumultuous streets of the Adian capital. Explosions lit the sky as the human fleet engaged Krall's forces in orbit. On the ground, protests clashed with military units. Their cries and the sounds of weapons filling the air, Joseph and his small team of coalition members moved swiftly through the shadows, Captain Lyra taking the lead. As they neared the palace, a group of Ashen guards blocked their path, their scales gleaming in the flashing lights of the battle. Their progress was halted when one of the guards shouted, raising his weapon. Joseph stepped forward with his hands raised. "We need to see Queen Maya." "It's urgent," the guard's eyes narrowed. "By order of General Krall, no one is allowed inside the palace," Joseph spoke calmly but firmly, "your queen is in labor. The child she carries could be the key to peace between our peoples. Are you really willing to risk that future on the orders of a general who's trying to overthrow the government?" The guards exchanged uncertain looks, and Joseph pressed on. "I'm not asking you to join us, just to look the other way for the sake of Ozia." After a tense moment, the lead guard lowered his weapon. "Go quickly." As they rushed past, Captain Lyra gave Joseph an approving nod. "Not bad, Ambassador." They entered the palace through a side entrance, but their progress was soon stopped by the sound of approaching footsteps. Lyra quickly pushed Joseph behind a pillar just as a squad of Krall's loyal guards rounded the corner. "We've got this," Lyra whispered, signaling to her coalition allies. With swift, precise movements, they engaged the guards. Energy bolts whizzed through the air as Lyra moved between columns, her combat training evident in every move. Within moments, the guards were unconscious. "Impressive," Joseph whispered. Lyra smiled slightly. "Stay close, we're not out of this yet." As they advanced deeper into the palace, the sounds of conflict grew louder. Turning a corner, they found themselves in the middle of a firefight between palace security and what appeared to be human special forces. Admiral Reeves, Joseph realized. She must have sent them to help us. Seizing the opportunity, they slipped past the chaos and continued toward the royal chambers. The corridors were a maze, but Lyra seemed to know exactly where she was headed. Suddenly, a loud voice echoed through the hallway. "Stop right there." General Krall appeared before them, his scales dark with anger, his high-powered energy weapon aimed at Joseph's chest. "You've caused enough trouble, human." Krall snarled. Joseph quickly searched for a way to defuse the situation, but before he could speak, a cry of pain echoed through the palace. Queen Maya's voice. Krall's eyes widened, and his weapon wavered for just a moment. That was all Lyra needed. In the blink of an eye, she disarmed the general, sending his weapon crashing to the floor. "It's over, Krall," she said, her own weapon now aimed at him. With the general subdued, Joseph dashed toward the source of the cry. Bursting into the royal chambers, he found controlled chaos. Queen Maya lay on a bed, her scales shimmering with exertion. Dr. Zara stood beside her, focused on the task at hand. The room was filled with medical equipment, hastily arranged for the unprecedented birth. "Maya," Joseph gasped, reaching out. He rushed to her side and took her hand. "I'm here," he said softly. Dr. Zara looked up, her face a mixture of concern and resolve. "The hybrid nature of the child is complicating the birth. I need to perform an emergency procedure." Joseph nodded, squeezing Maya's hand. Do what you need to, Doctor. As Zara worked, Joseph spoke softly to Maya, offering words of encouragement. Despite the surreal situation, his words came naturally. Outside, the sounds of battle seemed to fade, and the world narrowed down to this room, this moment. Finally, after what seemed like hours, but was only a matter of minutes, a new sound filled the room, the cry of a newborn. Dr. Zara held up the child, a girl with both human and alien features. She's healthy, Dr. Zara announced, awe in her voice. And preliminary scans show the genetic markers we were hoping for. This child could hold the cure for the Ocean genetic disorder. As Joseph and Maya gazed at their daughter, a wave of emotions washed over them, joy, fear, awe, and an unshakable bond. But their moment was interrupted by Captain Lyra, who entered the room with urgency in her expression. Ambassador, Your Majesty, there's a situation outside. Reluctantly, Joseph pulled his gaze away from his newborn daughter. What's happening? Lord Zan has mobilized his supporters. They've surrounded the palace, forming a barrier between us and Krall's remaining forces. Admiral Reeves is requesting an immediate conference call with Earth's government and the loyal Ocean officials. Joseph looked back at Maya and their child, then nodded resolutely. It's time to build a new future for all of us. As he prepared to face the challenges ahead, Joseph understood that the birth of his daughter was only the beginning. The real work of uniting their two species was about to unfold in ways neither Joseph nor Maya could have foreseen. Just as Joseph prepared to address the gathered crowd, a sharp wail came from the newborn. The sound, a blend of human and alien tones, seemed to cut through the chaos outside. Joseph and Maya exchanged a look of concern. I'll stay with her, Maya said, her voice weak but determined. Go. They need to hear from you, Joseph nodded, squeezing Maya's hand one last time before following Captain Lyra out of the room, as they moved through the palace corridors. Joseph's mind raced with the implications of what had just happened. A hybrid child, born of human and Ocean parents, now lay in the royal chambers. The consequences were staggering. They emerged onto a balcony overlooking the palace grounds below. A sea of faces, both human and alien, looked up expectantly. Joseph could see the mixture of hope and fear in their eyes. People of Oja, Joseph began, his voice amplified by the palace communication system. Today marks a new chapter in the history of our two species. A child has been born. A child of both human and alien heritage. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Joseph continued, this child represents the potential for unity and understanding between our peoples. But more importantly, preliminary medical scans suggest that this child's unique genetic makeup may hold the key to curing a long-standing Ocean genetic disorder. The murmur grew louder, a mix of excitement and disbelief. Joseph raised his hands, calling for calm. I know this news will be met with a range of emotions. Some will see it as a threat to alien purity, while others will view it as a miraculous opportunity. I ask all of you to consider the possibilities that lie before us. As Joseph spoke, activity inside the palace intensified. Dr. Zara, still reeling from the implications of her initial findings, worked feverishly in a makeshift lab. Her hands flew over holographic displays, analyzing and reanalyzing the hybrid child's genetic structure. This is incredible, she muttered to herself, her eyes wide with wonder. The child's DNA was a perfect fusion of human and alien genes, creating entirely new protein structures. One in particular seemed to directly target the faulty gene responsible for the Ocean disorder. Elsewhere in the palace, Admiral Reeves was engaged in a tense video conference with Earth's government and loyal Ocean officials. The situation on Oja is volatile, Reeves reported. But this birth presents an unprecedented opportunity for cooperation between our species. The human Secretary of State nodded gravely. We agree, Admiral, but we must proceed with caution. The wrong move could plunge Oja into civil war. While the diplomats debated, Lord Zan made his move. He strode through the streets, his voice booming over the commotion. Fellow Ozans, the birth of this child is a sign. It is time to embrace change, to welcome our human brothers and sisters as true partners in shaping Oja's future. His words resonated with younger Ozans, who cheered and echoed his cry. However, not everyone was receptive. Pockets of resistance formed, with older Adians shouting for the preservation of their traditional way of life. Back in the palace, Joseph concluded his address. As he turned to re-enter the building, Captain Lyra grabbed his arm. "Ambassador, we have a problem," she said, her voice low and urgent. "General Krall has escaped custody. He's rallying his loyalists at a military base outside the city." Joseph's heart sank. He had hoped that Krall's capture would end the immediate threat, but it seemed the general had other plans. "We need to secure the palace," Joseph said, "and the child. If Krall gets his hands on her." He didn't need to finish the thought. The consequences were clear to both of them. As they hurried back inside, reports began circulating about Krall's pure Adian movement. The general's fiery rhetoric, calling for the expulsion of all humans and the purification of the royal bloodline, spread rapidly through communication channels. Joseph returned to the royal chambers to find Maya cradling their daughter, her expression a mixture of love and concern. "What's happening out there?" she asked. Joseph took a deep breath. "It's complicated, but we have an opportunity to create real change, to bring our people together. It won't be easy, but I believe it's possible." Maya nodded, her eyes returning to their newborn. "What should we name her?" she asked softly. Before Joseph could answer, Dr. Zara entered the room, her scales flushed with excitement. "Your Majesty, Ambassador," she said quickly, "I've confirmed my initial findings. Your daughter's blood contains compounds that could cure the Ashen genetic disorder. But there's more. Her cognitive development is accelerating at a rate far beyond anything we've seen in either human or Ashen children." The weight of this revelation settled over them. Their daughter, only hours old, carried the future of two species on her tiny shoulders. As Joseph and Maya processed this, an aide rushed in. "Ambassador, Your Majesty," the aide said with a bow, "Admiral Reeves requests your immediate presence. She says it's urgent." Joseph and Maya exchanged a look. Whatever happened next would define the future of both their worlds. With a last glance at their daughter, they readied themselves for the challenges ahead, knowing that the true work of uniting their peoples had just begun. The difficulties ahead seemed daunting, but Joseph understood they had no choice but to face them. As they prepared to leave the palace, Dr. Zara approached with a concerned expression. "Your Majesty, Ambassador, I must advise against moving the child so soon after birth. Her unique physiology requires careful monitoring." Joseph and Maya exchanged a look, torn between caution and urgency. After a moment of hesitation, Maya spoke. "We understand the risks, Doctor, but we can't stay here. The palace is no longer safe, and our daughter must be seen by the people." With a reluctant nod, Dr. Zara began to prepare a portable medical kit. "I'll accompany you to monitor her vitals," on their way to the spaceport. Joseph marveled at Maya's strength. Still weak from the difficult birth, she held their child close, her scales shimmering with exhaustion yet determination. The journey to the largest city outside the capital was tense, with the ship's security on high alert for potential threats. As they neared the spaceport, Joseph's comm buzzed with an incoming message from Admiral Reeves. "Ambassador, we've detected unusual activity in the city. Be on your guard." Joseph's heart raced as he relayed the warning to Captain Lyra, who immediately tightened the security protocols. As the ship touched down, the air was thick with tension. The moment the doors opened, the crowd's cheers and jeers overwhelmed them. Joseph took a deep breath, squeezing Maya's hand before they stepped out. The reaction was immediate and intense. Some Adians reached out, their faces full of hope at the sight of the hybrid princess. Others recoiled, disgust and fear etched on their faces. As they moved through the city streets, Joseph remained vigilant. He noticed the human and Adian security forces surrounding them, a symbol of the unity they hoped to achieve. Halfway through their procession, chaos erupted. Explosions tore through the air, and the crowd panicked. In the confusion, Joseph felt Maya's hand torn from his grasp. "Maya," he shouted, but his voice was drowned in the screams and stampedes. Through the smoke and debris, he saw Maya duck into a side alley, cradling their daughter tightly. He tried to follow but was blocked by fleeing civilians. Instinct took over. Joseph dove into a nearby building, narrowly avoiding a volley of energy blasts that scorched the ground where he had been. His heart pounded as he pressed himself against the wall, straining to hear any sign of Maya or their daughter. Outside, the chaos continued. Joseph peered cautiously around the corner and saw Maya. Her guard overwhelmed, facing off with a figure he assumed to be one of Krall's assassins. To his surprise, Maya moved with remarkable grace and strength. Despite her recent ordeal, she dodged the assassin's attacks while protecting their daughter. With a swift move, she swept the assassin off his feet, sending him crashing to the ground. The crowd, momentarily stunned, erupted in cheers. Joseph saw humans and aliens alike moving to protect Maya and their daughter, their differences set aside in the face of a common enemy. As the security forces regained control, Joseph emerged, rushing to reunite with his family. The relief was overwhelming as he embraced Maya and their daughter, ignoring the cameras around them. But their reunion was short-lived. A new threat appeared. A group of Ashen purists, their scales dark with anger, pushed toward them, intent on eliminating the hybrid princess. But before they could reach the royal family, something unexpected happened. The humans and moderate Ashens formed a protective circle around them, blocking the purists. Joseph watched in awe as the lines between species dissolved, replaced by a shared drive to protect the innocent. The image of a united front against hatred was powerful, and Joseph knew it would resonate across the planet. As the last of the purists were subdued, Joseph turned to Maya. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the tension and fear of the day seemed to melt away. Without saying a word, they shared a passionate kiss, a symbol of their love and commitment. The crowd's reaction was mixed, some cheered, others turned away, but the moment was raw and emotional. Joseph could feel public opinion beginning to shift. As they pulled apart, Joseph's calm buzzed again. It was Admiral Reeves. "Ambassador, I'm sending medical ships. We'll offer aid to all injured Ashens, regardless of their stance." Joseph nodded, knowing that this gesture would help improve relations. As he watched the medical ships descend, a glimmer of hope sparked within him. Yet, even as hope grew, he knew their challenges were far from over. General Krall was still out there, planning his next move, and Lord Zan had called an emergency session of the governing body. As night fell on the chaotic day, Joseph held Maya and their daughter close, knowing their journey had only just begun. The fate of both species hung in the balance, and the decisions they made in the coming days would shape the future of humanity and the Ashens. With resolve and trepidation, Joseph prepared for what lay ahead. The road would be difficult, but as he looked at his family, he knew it was a path worth taking. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind. Joseph and Maya continued their tour, with their daughter, Princess Lyra, growing at an incredible rate. Lyra's unique physiology allowed her to absorb knowledge quickly, speaking and understanding complex concepts far beyond her years. As they traveled across Osia, showcasing the benefits of human-Ashen cooperation, Joseph couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the surface. His instincts were right. Admiral Reeves contacted him with urgent news. "Ambassador, we've lost contact with several key government buildings in the capital," Reeves reported. "General Krall has made his move." Joseph's heart sank as he absorbed the news. "How bad is it?" "He's taken control of the main communication hub and several other strategic locations. We're looking at a full-scale assault on the capital." As Joseph shared this with Maya, she immediately saw the urgency. "We need to act fast," she said, cradling Lyra. Joseph nodded, his mind racing. "I have a plan," he said, turning back to the comm link. "Admiral, can you get us to the central broadcasting station?" Reeves hesitated. "It won't be easy, but we can try." "What's your plan?" Joseph looked at Lyra, who was watching him intently. "We're going to use our secret weapon, the journey to the broadcasting station was perilous. Krull's forces had spread throughout the city, engaging loyal Ashen troops in brutal firefights. As their transport weaved through the chaos, Joseph found himself facing a group of uncertain soldiers. "Your loyalty should lie with Ad Doya, not with a madman like Krull," Joseph argued, testing his diplomatic skills. "Join us and help bring peace to your world." The soldiers hesitated, their weapons trained on Joseph and his team. After a tense moment, one soldier lowered his weapon. "We'll follow your lead, Ambassador," he said, steadying his voice. Joseph nodded gratefully, and together they pressed on. The time had come to deliver their message of hope, and with it, to make a final stand against Krull's forces.